Welcome to the Paddle and Portage Podcast.
Our mission at Paddle and Portage is to bring the paddling, the wilderness community together through news, information, and most importantly, stories.
And one way we do that is through conversations.
Here today is one of those conversations.
Joining us now on the podcast is Abby Golden from Wilderness Water Safety, a Minnesota-based business. Abby, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Joe. I'm excited to be here.
Well, let's talk about the Boundary Waters first. You got any trips on the schedule this year?
So not in the Boundary Waters, but yes, we have some trips scheduled.
Where are you going?
We're going to be headed to the Temagami area in Ontario, so just north of North Bay, Ontario.
Tell us a little more about the location and what this place is that you're going to. I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah. So it's similar to the Boundary Waters. Some of the lakes are definitely a little bit bigger, so we have some more open water. A lot of portaging. There's a few rivers that run through there as well. So Temagami is located, like I said, just north of North Bay, Ontario, about an hour north. The actual Lake Temagami itself there's cabins there. There's quite a few canoe tripping camps there. So motors are allowed on this particular lake. And then once you get off the lake into the surrounding area, it's all very pristine. So Lady Evelyn Provincial Park is just right north of Lake Temagami as well. So really good access to a couple of different spots over there. Lake Temagami, you could do a canoe trip and stay on the lake for about 2 weeks and stay at a different campsite every day.
So from Thunder Bay or Lake Superior, where are you going from that?
So coming from Minnesota, we always cross over through Sault Ste. Marie, essentially, and then we start heading east. Uh-huh. So it's technically a little bit south of where Thunder Bay is. You kind of cut over east a little bit and just a little south, I guess.
Like by Algonquin?
Yes, yeah, close to Algonquin. It's about 2 hours from Algonquin Park.
Okay,
yeah.
Right. And what drew you here, other than these really remote descriptions that you're saying and solitude and so forth like that? It's pretty obvious, but how did you find this place and why was it there versus Woodland Caribou or something to kind of due north from Minnesota?
Absolutely. So the first time I visited Lake Temagami was in 2008, and Wilderness Water Safety brought me to Lake Temagami. There's a couple of canoe tripping camps there that all of their staff go through our course. And so the first time I was there was really just to help train staff on the lake. And I really fell in love with these camps up there and the way that they travel. Quite a few of them stick to really old traditions. So they're traveling in wood canvas canoes, they're traveling with wannigans, they're traveling with tump lines, cooking over a fire, they're bringing axes, they're bringing saws, that kind of style. So really a lot of the way of the travel hasn't changed since the 1930s when these camps really started out. So I was really drawn to that, and the community around the lake was really wonderful. And so then I applied for a job at one of the camps when I was 18 and got the job for the summer, and then started spending summers up there, taking kids on canoe trips.
So you know this area. You know where you're going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Mm-hmm. And this is like boreal forest or pine forest?
Boreal forest, yeah. Yeah, there's some really great old growth in there as well. Yeah, there's some boreal forest and some pine as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Our training up there will wrap up. I'll spend about 2 weeks on the lake and in Algonquin Park traveling to different summer camps to do trainings. And then after that, I'll take a little vacation of my own and travel with my dad, and I will take a canoe trip together up there.
Are you from Minnesota, or what's your background?
Yeah, born and raised in Minnesota, Afton, Lakeland, Minnesota, Stillwater, right in the river valley there in the St. Croix River. Moved away for a little while when I turned 18, moved to Colorado and lived in Denver, Colorado, a little bit in Boulder and in Glenwood Springs. And then Wilderness Water Safety really kind of brought me back. Every year I would travel back to Minnesota to help do these courses and trainings. And I missed Minnesota a lot. Colorado is wonderful, but there's not a ton of water. There's some great areas to play around in whitewater and things like that, but I missed the flat water paddling and all of the greenery that we have around here too.
Mm-hmm. All right. And tell us about Wilderness Water Safety, what the organization is and provides and so forth.
Yeah, so Wilderness Water Safety, it started in 1989. And the way that it started was a camp director actually reached out to my dad, Dave Golden, the founder of Wilderness Water Safety, reached out to Dave. So he knew Dave as a lifeguard trainer, a lifeguard instructor trainer, and he taught wilderness first aid and CPR classes, front country first aid. So really involved with all of that kind of training. Reached out to him, and the camp director had told him, hey, we had an incident where there was a death at this particular camp in water, so there was a drowning.
And where was that? Like in the Boundary Waters, or?
Yeah, that was a trip out in the Boundary Waters. And the director called my dad and said, hey, we're missing a piece of our training. We're doing, wilderness first aid. That's been really great, and everybody had their lifeguarding certificate. American Red Cross lifeguarding is awesome, but they realized we're not thinking about the wilderness piece of it. We're doing this training where we're taking lifeguarding in a pool, and we're using rescue tubes to learn all of those things, but we're not putting it into wilderness context. So really the course started there, and then as time went on, by word of mouth, we've gotten more and more camps that were looking for our course and our kind of training, essentially. So it's very much so geared for people that are going into the backcountry. We try to make it as applicable as possible for those that are especially guiding.
And what's the gap? What's missing between what somebody would learn in a pool versus the wilderness?
Yeah, so one of the main things is right when you show up to a beach or a pool, it is set up with safety in mind at the forefront, right? And there's things that that we can think of right now where it's set up for that, right? So we know what the depth is always. The water is usually relatively clear. At a beach, everything is cleared out from the bottom. There's no hazards there. With a pool, there's signage everywhere. All of these things that are for safety. When you show up to a campsite in the backcountry, or if you're just paddling and you're at a portage or something like that, there's nothing in mind for safety that's set up other than maybe the campsite or portage is marked on a map, right? Or we know where the route is. But other than that, the people using that site have to be the ones to even just set up their waterfront, right? Is this a good place to go swimming? So that's kind of where we start the course out, is just the basic, can we get into the water here in a safe way? So even our entry and exit points, can we get in and out? And then if somebody's injured, can we get them out as well? Are they going to be able to get themselves out? That kind of thing. So that one's there. And then also what we have with us as far as a rescue device when we're out in the backcountry, we're not carrying, typically we're not carrying rescue tubes like the big red ones, that you see lifeguards walking around with. So our rescue device, we use a PFD. We show people how to get somebody onto flotation if that person is unable to get themselves onto flotation. So we've got rescues starting at the surface, and then also submerged rescues as well, where we teach people how to bring somebody up to the surface and get them onto that flotation.
So an outfitter or a business in Ely or up the Gunflint near Grand Marais would contact you or Wilderness Water Safety and say, come and teach our crew these safety training and things that you've just described. Is that how it works? Or tell me how it works.
Yeah, typically that's how it works. Folks will reach out to us and say, hey, I've heard about your course and I think we'd be a really good fit. So usually we have, with a new client or a new organization that would like to take our course, we have a phone call or a Zoom meeting with them, hear what they're all about and what they're doing, and we kind of make a decision together if this is going to be an appropriate course for them to take. If it's a traditional waterfront kind of camp or organization, we say, we'll definitely come and teach a course, but Red Cross lifeguarding is still a way to go for you guys too. So we make sure that it's the correct and appropriate fit before we go and teach a course. But yes, folks reach out to us and then we will come to them to teach the course. So we usually go to a location and meet with them. We ask that there's at least 10 people in the course, and if not, we can always send folks to a different course as well. So if only 2 need the certification, we'll find another place where we can fit them in that we already have scheduled.
And how long is the course or intensive?
Yeah, so the course is 2 days, and it's a mix between a lot of scenario-based learning and so classroom time, a lot of discussion-based things, and then we also are getting into a lake. So that's another big difference between American Red Cross lifeguarding and what we do. We're teaching all of our hard skills in a natural body of water rather than a pool, because our skills change when we change the environment, right? So going down in 8 feet of water in a really clear, warm pool is a whole lot different than going down in a dark lake in 8 feet of water. Yeah, that's kind of how we set everything up, or how folks are able to get in contact with us.
All right. And what happened in that situation with the person who died, and that is the catalyst, the origins of the business?
So this is an organization that takes people of all abilities out on trips. And so they were out in the Boundary Waters, and they were life jackets all the time early on. So since the 80s, they were in boats with life jackets on, which is different from a lot of organizations. So they were out in the middle of a lake, and a participant had asked, "Can I take my life jacket off to take my shirt off?" He was hot. So he took his shirt off, or took his life jacket off, and then as he was taking his shirt off, he had a grand mal seizure and went over the side of the canoe in about 60 feet of water. And at that point, he was really rigid, so he just went pretty much straight down. So he didn't have that PFD on anymore. So the director of the organization was actually on that trip. He was the guide, and was just very like, I don't know what I could have done, and just realized that there was a lot of other situations too that he felt he had been put into where things could have gone a lot worse as well, and had a similar outcome, but he just kind of got lucky in those situations. So that's really where this all started. And we tell that story in our course. We make sure to put it in there, and folks always ask, well, what should they have done? And really, it's a preventative thing, right? There's not much we can do if somebody goes over the side of a canoe in 60 feet of water and they go straight down. We can't get to them at that point. So a lot of what we teach is preventative, right? We want to make sure that if we need to take our PFD off, we're coming closer to the shore, essentially, where it's more manageable.
I see. Right. And are you privy to any experiences with people that you paddle with where there's been life and death situations, or you've experienced something like that on a canoe trip or a paddle trip?
I always say that I have been close to folks that have lost somebody out on a trip, or have come very close to. Through this course, we talk to a lot of different people about their experiences and what their stories are. I say I've gotten very lucky, right? I think all of us in the paddling community can agree that we've all had moments where we take a step back and reflect and say, I got very lucky. My personal luck story is, I smile about it now, but in the moment was very scary. I was a guide at this summer camp at Camp Waban on Lake Temagami, and I had a group of girls with me, and we were coming to a lake where I knew of a great campsite. I'd stayed there before, and it was just an island campsite, absolutely beautiful. And I said, girls, we're going to get to this campsite. It's going to be amazing. So we were leaving a portage after we had just had lunch, and way in the distance, we could hear some rumbles of thunder. Okay, so I said, well, let's get in our canoes and start going. And we needed to leave the portage a little bit so we could actually see where the clouds were at. Well, I knew that there was a campsite about 1 kilometer off the portage, but it wasn't my favorite campsite. So we were passing the first campsite, and I thought, oh, we can make it. I was looking back behind us and thought, we can beat the storm, right? So onward we went, and the next campsite, my favorite campsite, was about 4 kilometers away. And at this point, we had gotten pretty fast. You can't go too fast in a canoe, but as a group, we'd been together for quite some time, and thought we can make it. So we decided to stay close to shore just in case we needed to pull off. And I looked over to the gals in the canoe next to me, and their hair was all kind of wet and pulled back, because it had been raining all day. And then I started to see like the little tendrils that are out of their ponytails sticking straight up. And so that was a bit of a red flag for me, and I thought that's an odd wind pattern. And then I looked around at the rest of the gals in other canoes, and everybody's hair was sticking straight up. So we knew that lightning was right in the area. So we paddled ashore as quickly as we could. It was one of those moments of get to shore now. And once we got to shore, luckily everybody did get out of boats. And it felt like as soon as I put my foot on the ground out of my boat, we saw lightning and then thunder immediately on top of us. There was no time in between or anything like that. So that was a moment for me where I felt like I got very lucky that nobody had gotten struck by lightning. The lightning didn't hit anything on shore either, But it was definitely a good wake-up call for sure.
I'm Jason with Ely Outfitting Company in downtown Ely, Minnesota. As the stories by Joe M. and the Paddle and Portage team inspire you to explore the boundary waters, let our trail-savvy crew make your trip planning simple. If you haven't tried our free online trip routing service, complete with awesome interactive maps, check out elyoutfittingcompany.com. And when you're ready, find complete outfitting services, lightweight canoe rentals, and comfy bunkhouse lodging at Ely Outfitting Company.
Do you feel there's value in talking honestly and sharing these types of stories, either about death or dangerous situations? Like, is that something that you do during the courses and just as the outreach of the organization?
Yeah, that's actually a huge part of what we do. So we use storytelling to teach other people about what can happen and what has happened to other folks out there. We actually ask folks at the beginning, the very first thing that we do in class is we say it's story time. And we ask everybody in our course to share a story in a small group about risk, backcountry, and water. And usually everybody has one of those stories. Sometimes people don't know that they have one of those stories until we're in the middle of class and they say, oh, I do have a story for you. So yeah, I think there's a huge benefit. Just even as the course goes on, lights are starting to go on in people's eyes. All of our scenarios have come from real stories through people that have either taken the course or folks that are teaching the course. So we at Wilderness Water Safety feel that there's a big value in talking about these things and talking about them openly without shame as well. Raising your hand and saying, I've made these mistakes as well, and I probably will again, right? And being honest and open about that is huge.
Are there some other anecdotes or stories that you can share with us that you use either when you're meeting with groups or just that you are aware of?
Yes, absolutely. There's different categories of stories for sure as well.
Well, some more lightning. Do you have more lightning? I mean, because my experience with lightning and Last Entry Point, the book about stories in danger, death in the boundary waters, is like the lightning story that's in there. A guy who now lives in Georgia, Ben is his name. It's a really intense story, and it's the one that I think scares people the most, is the lightning strike, and his brother and nephew died in that incident, and it's just like, what do you do? Lightning, it freaks people out.
Yeah, lightning's a big one. That one can be scary because it is relatively unpredictable too, and we're taught to take shelter not under big trees, right, or dead trees, things like that, and we're around these spaces all the time, or not to go to an island, and sometimes that's your only option if you get caught into a storm, and those things can come up very quickly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually somebody, a good friend of mine, he's been a canoe tripper for a long time, also worked at Camp Wabun. He still does work there. He would take the oldest boys of the camp on a 6-week canoe trip every summer, and he experienced a lightning strike as well, where they did have to paddle. They were in the middle of a really large lake, and storm came up kind of behind them, and the only option that they had to pull off to was an island. So they're on an island and got into lightning drill, and followed the protocol for what that particular camp had. So they were all trying to be spread out from one another, and unfortunately, lightning did strike a big tree that was on the island and also hit through the ground, hit one of the participants as well. Felt for a pulse, and there was not a pulse. So immediately Pete actually said he grabbed the guy by the shirt and just kind of threw him onto the ground where it was a hard, flat surface so he could start CPR. And he did do CPR and got his heart going again. When this individual woke up, he just started screaming boom over and over. And hearing Pete tell the story, it's jarring, hearing him and watching him go through everything again. It leaves a really big impact on everybody that does hear it, and it stays with us for sure.
What was the age of the person that got struck?
I believe he was 17.
So he gets struck, this 17-year-old young guy, and his heart stops. Mm-hmm. The person gets it going again and is doing CPR, and then the young guy jumps up and he starts yelling boom over and over again?
Yes. And then,
Wow, that's I mean,
Yeah.
a very powerful scene to imagine, and that's like in a place like the Boundary Waters.
this was, so they were actually on their way to either Hudson or James Bay. I can't remember what river they were doing, but they were pretty far north. And at this point, they were about mid-trip, I believe, as well. So, yeah, they were up there. The way they got evac'd was Pete had made note earlier in the day that he saw a plane, a float plane, flying into a spot, and he knew where that particular spot would have been. Before the storm, they didn't see that float plane leave again. So he had it in the back of his mind that there is a float plane at least relatively nearby, closer than any other kind of help that we're going to get. So he grabbed another strong paddler from the group and took that person that needed to be evac'd out.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And was this young guy like delirious as he's yelling boom?
He was, I believe he was yelling that for quite some time. It was, while they were paddling him over to the float plane as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And are you also talking about capsizing and cold water during the courses?
Yeah, absolutely. Cold water is a huge one that we talk about, especially, Boundary Waters. That water stays cold for quite some time. Yeah, so we talk a lot about capsizing cold water, and just it's not that we can, of course, manage paddling in these places and going out and traveling, but we just have to be aware the power of cold water. And if we get stuck in it, if we capsize in cold water and we're too far away from shore, we have to understand that that's a very serious situation. So before we are paddling on cold water, there's definitely extra precautions we should be taking. The answer is relatively simple, and that's staying close to shore. Asking yourself, should we be paddling today if there's a relatively decent wind and we have to make a bigger crossing and the water is, colder than maybe a midsummer day? Then we have to take those precautions and say maybe we're windbound, when on a nicer day maybe we're not, because we know that if we go over we'll still be okay.
Mm-hmm. And are you using anecdotes to then drive home that message that you just shared about cold water?
Yes.
What's a story about that?
So we hear these stories that sound very similar year after year, whether they're happening in the Boundary Waters or if they're happening in Ontario. There's a story out of Ontario from a couple of years back. Two fathers and their sons went out on a day fishing trip, just out for the day. And it was early season, so probably May. And what was found, they didn't return, basically, at the end of the day, and 2 capsized canoes were found. There was a search that was done, and they unfortunately found all 4 people had gotten hypothermia and passed away. So the idea is basically they were just too far away from shore, and canoes both went over, so they weren't able to self-rescue, and then they weren't able to get back to shore in time, because we really don't have a ton of time once we're in that cold water of all of our faculties still working. That's one that really hits home as well, where we're not even going out for a night. We're just going out for a day trip and going fishing. Even in those situations, we need to prepare like we're going out for 3 days even. Just having that mindset of, oh, we're just out for the day. Unfortunately, we just have to be more mindful anyway about these temperatures. So yeah, there's that one that's happened. Lake Superior and folks doing any sort of crossings, we really drive home that we need to stick together. If you flip and there's nobody around and those rollers are going and boats can't see one another, we might not know that somebody has gone over. And every few years, it seems like around the Apostle Islands or on Lake Superior somewhere, we have those kinds of incidents happen where boats get spread apart, one goes over, and the other boats aren't aware that this particular boat went over.
Mm. Wow. Do you get feedback from either the people you work with or just individuals themselves who were in the course that it has helped them save somebody, or that it just influenced how they paddle and recreate?
Yes, all the time. Yeah, all the time. It's funny, when we go to a new organization, sometimes there's pushback, of course, like, oh, another training course I have to take? Like, what are we doing, And it's understandable. These folks are doing wilderness first aid or wilderness EMT or first responder. A lot of them already have some sort of water safety in their arsenal as well, maybe some swift water rescue, something like that. But the folks that end up liking our course the most are the folks that have given us some pushback before, and the people that have been doing this for a long time that have never taken our course before. So yes, there's been some situations where we've been told, hey, I was able to save somebody, even if that's as simple as I recognized what a swimmer in trouble looks like. I recognized that this person needed help and they weren't able to voice it. We just had somebody talking to us yesterday who had taken our course 15 years ago and came over and said, every time I see somebody cliff jumping, I think about you guys and your course. He told us that he doesn't go cliff jumping because of our course anymore.
What do you do about cliff jumping? What do you talk about?
Yeah, so cliff jumping out in the wilderness is one that I think people either love or really don't like, And there's just a lot of things to think about before doing that activity when we're so far away from any sort of help, because it's such a high-risk activity. But we're doing high-risky stuff all the time when we're out in the backcountry, right? We're starting fires, we're using knives, fishing line, maybe shooting whitewater, whatever it might be. But cliff jumping is one where, if we're at a beach, a pool, a water park that has some sort of entry from a height, it's specifically set up with safety in mind, just like any other facility like that. So like the platform has a sticky surface on it. It's hanging out over the edge of the water, so there's no chance that you can fall backwards and hit your head on the side or something like that. So there's just a lot of different things that can go wrong with cliff jumping, the hesitation that people usually have.
And it's not necessary. It's not getting you somewhere in terms of a new lake or a destination or a campsite. Like, there's no real reason to do it.
Right, exactly. And that's where some people will put an argument there of, oh, well, the self-confidence that this person had after they did this cliff jump.
Give me a break.
Right, exactly. That's how wilderness water safety feels about it. But we also know that the folks taking our course, a lot of times they're working for an organization where the rule is no. Right? And that's great. I think that's, it makes sense. Usually they're taking out other people's children. So we have to have that in mind. Now, a lot of the folks that we're training are in that late teens, early 20s stage of their life. And so we ask the question, okay, personal trips. Are you guys going cliff jumping? And a lot of them are. They'll say, yeah, we're going to go. So we do try to talk to them. We want to be all about harm prevention and reduction, right? So we do talk to them about what would be some safe ways to do this activity, and let's think about actually if something does go wrong, who are we putting at risk then to come and get you and make a rescue, right? And like you said, for what reason, right? Why are we doing this? What are we here for? Mm-hmm. So the things that we ask people of is, one, do you have a PFD with you? Do you have one with you at all? Whether or not you're wearing one, but do you have it with you? So if you're on a backpacking trip with friends and you see a lake and you want to do a cliff jump, do we have any sort of flotation, right? The next thing is, are you the only person that knows how to save somebody? Is there somebody that could potentially go in and save you if you needed it? Depth is a huge one with cliff jumping. Everybody right away, if they have a cliff jumping story for us, I ask them, well, how deep was it? And they say, oh, it's great. It's like 60, 70 feet of water underneath us. It's like, well, there might be a problem with that as well, right? We want enough water that we can jump into without hitting the bottom, but also we can't go down 60 feet of water to go get somebody, just like the beginning of our story. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of, you try to find that happy medium, but we just tell folks, I'd rather folks stay at the surface anyway, so I would put life jackets on people if we're doing any sort of entry from a height, for sure.
Yeah, I know some of the outfitters on the Gunflint I've talked with about cliff jumping, and it's just like, don't do it. Yeah. It's their whole idea when people are going out on trips. And people have died cliff jumping in the Boundary Waters, and we've talked about that on the podcast or on Paddle and Portage in the past. We'll add some links so people can find you and connect with you, either businesses or individuals or people who are just interested in learning a little bit more about wilderness water safety. We're talking with Abby Golden. I've enjoyed communicating with you about some real stuff. We've talked about real stuff, and that's what really drives me when we get to speak about things that aren't how great the paddling is, because we talk about that too.
Yeah.
But when we can dive into like some of these stories, scenarios, and what we can learn from them, that's really the biggest thing. Is what can we learn from these tragedies that have happened to other people, so that it doesn't happen to us or our loved ones or just anybody, and using those as educational tools while still being very, very mindful about the significance of loss when somebody passes away in the paddling community or on a canoe trip in a place like the Boundary Waters, where you're headed this summer on your Algonquin in this area that you were describing. Like there are preventative measures, and for all those who have been lost, it's a ripple effect that just keeps going and impacts these families for generations. So it's something to take seriously and think about when you're on a paddling trip. And Wilderness Water Safety is telling it like it is, talking straight facts. So I appreciate that, and nice talking with you. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
Special thanks to Darren and the team from Rutabaga Paddle Sports in Madison, Wisconsin, as well as Canoecopia, where this interview that you just heard today on the podcast was recorded at the Expo in Madison in 2025, although we're already looking forward to next year's event, Canoecopia 2026.
In case you don't know, Canoecopia is probably the largest gathering in the nation when it comes to paddle sports, and therefore it's the largest concentration of storytellers in the nation. We will continue to bring you those stories throughout the year so that you can be as inspired by this great community as we are. Don't forget to like, subscribe. Most importantly, go visit the website or the YouTube channel. We appreciate your support.